Klay had no choice but to trust that his compassion had bought him time. But as they rode toward the mountain camp, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was riding towards something far bigger than simple gratitude. The camp nestled in a hidden valley between towering red cliffs, invisible from the desert floor. Klay counted at least 200 people, warriors, women, children, elders, all moving with the quiet efficiency of a people who'd learned to survive in harsh country. They stared as he rode in, not with hostility, but with curiosity. Word of his deed had already spread. Takakota led him to the center of camp where a large fire pit waited, surrounded by smooth stones. The chief dismounted and gestured for Klay to do the same. "Sit," Takakota said. "Eat. Rest." Within minutes, Klay found himself overwhelmed by hospitality. Women brought bowls of stew that smelled like heaven after days of hunger. Children offered him water from decorated gourds. Men nodded respectfully as they passed. "This is more kindness than I deserve," Klay said. Takakota settled beside him on a woven blanket. "You showed mercy to a child who was not your blood, in a place where mercy could have cost your life. This deserves recognition." As Klay ate, Ayanna sat nearby, already looking healthier. She spoke rapidly to other children in their language, gesturing excitedly. Klay caught his name mentioned several times. What's she telling them? The story of the cowboy who gave away his tomorrow for strangers today. Takakota's eyes crinkled with amusement. Already it grows in the telling. By winter, you'll have fought off wolves barehanded. Despite everything, Klay smiled. Stories have a way of getting bigger. Stories are how we remember what matters. Takakota grew serious. "My people have many stories about white men. Most are dark, but tonight we add a different kind of story." An elder approached, a woman with silver hair braided with feathers and beads. She spoke to Takakota in rapid, urgent tones. Klay caught the respect in her voice, but also something else. Concern. Takakota listened, then nodded slowly. The woman melted back into the crowd. "Is everything all right?" Klay asked. "Moon Dancer brings news. Other tribes have heard about Ayanna's rescue, about the white man who sacrificed for a native child." Takakota's expression grew thoughtful. Word travels fast in the mountains. Is that a problem? Perhaps opportunity. Takakota stood. "Come, there is something you must see." He led Klay to the edge of camp where the ground dropped away into another valley. Below them, scattered across the landscape, were the flickering lights of more camps. Dozens of them. All those people. 7 tribes, Takakota confirmed. Traditional enemies, many of them. But tonight they gathered for the same reason. Klay's stomach dropped. "To discuss what to do with me? To discuss what your actions mean." Takakota placed a weathered hand on Klay's shoulder. "For generations, our peoples have warred. We have good reason for distrust. But you," he paused, "you have created something new, a crack in the wall between our worlds." The weight of implications settled on Klay like a physical burden. "I just helped a hungry child." "Yes, and sometimes the smallest pebble starts the greatest avalanche." Below them, drums began to beat in the scattered camps. The sound echoed off the canyon walls, creating a rhythm that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the earth itself. "What happens tomorrow?" Klay asked. Takakota's smile was enigmatic. "Tomorrow you will stand before 500 warriors from 7 tribes, and they will decide if your deed was an act of one man's conscience or a sign that peace between our peoples is possible." If you're enjoying the story, subscribe to the channel. The drums grew louder, and Klay realized he wasn't just a man who'd share his bread anymore. He'd become a symbol, whether he wanted to be or not. Klay barely slept. The drums continued through the night, their rhythm weaving through his dreams like a heartbeat made of sound. When dawn finally broke over the canyon rim, painting the red rocks gold, he found Takakota already awake, sitting by the dying fire. "Nervous?" the chief asked. "Terrified," Klay admitted. Takakota chuckled. "Good. Fear keeps a man honest." He stood, brushing dust from his buckskins. Time to prepare. Women from the camp approached with clothing, clean buckskins decorated with intricate beadwork. Klay looked questioningly at Takakota. You cannot stand before the council looking like a desert rat, Takakota explained. Honor demands proper presentation. As Klay changed clothes, he watched the valley below transform. The scattered camps were moving, converging toward a flat area between the cliffs. Hundreds of people flowed, like water, toward a common destination. Have gatherings like this happened before? Klay asked. Once, when I was young, to discuss war with the cavalry. Takakota's expression darkened. Many died afterward. Today, he shrugged, today we discuss the possibility of something different. They descended into the valley as the sun climbed higher. The assembled crowd was larger than Klay had imagined. Warriors from 7 tribes, each group distinct in their dress and markings, but all united in their focus on him. A circle had been formed with the leaders seated on blankets in the center. Klay recognized the hierarchy immediately. These were chiefs, war leaders, men whose words carried the weight of life and death. Takakota guided him to the center of the circle. The crowd fell silent. Brothers, Takakota began, his voice carrying across the gathering. 3 days ago, we lost more than my granddaughter. We lost hope that kindness could exist between our peoples. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some approving, others skeptical. But this man, Takakota, gestured to Klay, proved that courage comes in many forms. He could have passed by. He could have taken what little she carried. Instead, he gave away his own survival for a child he did not know. An older chief with scars across his chest stood. Pretty words, Takakota, but one man's kindness does not erase generations of broken promises. Agreement rumbled from several sections of the crowd. True, Takakota acknowledged. But if we judge all white men by the actions of the worst, do we not become like those who judge all natives by the actions of raiders? The scarred chief considered this. What do you propose? A test, Takakota said simply. His appearance matched that of countless other wanderers traversing the barren landscape. Weathered headwear, dirt-covered footwear, guiding an injured mount. Yet within 12 hours, 500 fighters would bow before his path. This transformation would stem entirely from his impending act of generosity. Against a ruthless sun, Klay Hawthorne tugged his brimmed hat downward. 2 days had passed since his belly ceased its hunger pangs, now replaced by an empty sensation that made every movement calculated. Dust his gray female horse, nursed her front left limb. Another sign that their expedition had stretched both beyond endurance. From his weathered saddlebag, he retrieved the weight of his final valuable possession, one bread portion enclosed in fabric, now tough as hide, yet still sustenance, still survival. The route forward extended infinitely across crimson soil and scattered stones. No settlement within a day's journey, perhaps 2. No water source since the previous dawn. Across parched lips, Klay moved his tongue while mentally computing survival odds. The bread portion could provide energy to reach the following town. However, upon ascending a minor elevation, motion captured his attention. 20 paces from the pathway, pressed against a rock formation, a tiny form rested. Ebony hair, damaged garments that once might have been buckskin. A youth barely 8 or 9 summers old. Instinctively, Klay's palm shifted toward his hip weapon, then halted. The child remained motionless, not even glancing upward, simply seated there with arms encircling bent knees, swaying gently. Through 35 years of existence, he'd witnessed sufficient death to identify its approach. Wisdom dictated continued walking. This represented disputed land, taking positions, displaying compassion. Such indulgences belonged to individuals with satisfied stomachs and secure destinations. Yet something within the child's stillness caused Klay's movement to cease. He examined the small form again. Indigenous, judging by the clothing, likely lost, possibly abandoned, certainly starving. Klay's digits located the bread within his saddlebag, his final bread, his survival. The child lifted her gaze then, and Klay observed eyes containing no terror of him, merely the serene resignation of someone who'd already accepted dying. In that instant, Klay Hawthorne reached a decision that would resonate throughout the mountains in ways beyond his imagination. For occasionally the tiniest actions generate the loudest reverberations, though he remained unaware that concealed observers were already monitoring from the overhead cliffs. Slowly, Klay advanced, his boots grinding against the gravelly terrain. The child, clearly a girl now, didn't shift, flee, or seem concerned that a stranger was narrowing the gap between them. At close range, the circumstances appeared worse than initially assessed. Her lips showed white and split. Despite the heat, her small palms shook. This transcended mere hunger. This was death's threshold. Steady now, Klay spoke softly, lowering to her level. The girl's dark gaze met his. No words exchanged between them, but Klay comprehended. He displayed that identical expression during wartime, the appearance of someone who'd ceased struggling and begun waiting. From his saddlebag, he extracted the bread, unwrapping it with care. The outer layer was sufficiently hard to damage teeth, yet it remained nourishment, genuine sustenance. The girl's eyes tracked his actions, though she made no attempt to reach for it. Perhaps pride, fear, or maybe weakness prevented trying. Klay broke a portion and extended it. Continue. With trembling fingers, she accepted it, biting with the desperate caution of someone who hadn't eaten for days. Her chewing sound was the sole noise in the surrounding vastness. While she consumed it, Klay surveyed the terrain. No nearby encampment, no indicators of her origin or destination, just endless red earth and distant peaks shimmering in heat. He broke another portion, then another. Each piece he surrendered represented a day from his own existence. But observing her eat made the exchange worthwhile. "What do they call you?" he inquired. She completed chewing, swallowed with difficulty. When she responded, her voice barely rose above silence. "Ayanna, that's beautiful. I'm Klay." She acknowledged and took another small bite, conserving the bread. Intelligent child. She grasped survival. Yet as Klay observed her eating, fresh concern invaded his thoughts. Feeding her solved only the initial challenge. Alone out here, she wouldn't survive another day, even with food in her stomach. And he was barely equipped for self-preservation, much less a child. Logic would be giving her the remaining bread and continuing onward, allow her destiny to unfold without entanglement. But looking at Ayanna, seeing her clutch the bread like precious metal, Klay understood he'd already decided when he ceased walking. He provided her the final bread piece and watched her wrap it carefully in the cloth, preserving it for later. The gesture affected him more than anticipated. Hope, planning for tomorrow. "Where is your family, Ayanna?" Her eyes grew distant. "Gone." One word that revealed everything and nothing in this place. Gone might mean deceased, might mean lost, might mean worse. Klay rose, his joints objecting. Thus observed them both. Her ears pointed forward with animal interest. "Well," Klay said, more to himself than her, "cannot abandon you here." But as he assisted Ayanna to her feet, he remained unaware that a compassionate act had been witnessed by more than desert winds. High in the rocky cliffs above, forms moved within shadows. Silent observers who had seen everything, and they were already mobilizing. Klay lifted Ayanna onto Dust's back. The mare snorted softly, but accepted the additional burden. The girl weighed practically nothing, another indication of how close to death she'd been. "We'll locate somewhere safe for you," Klay declared, though he had no idea where that might be. The nearest settlement remained a day's difficult ride, assuming Dust's leg endured. As they began walking, Ayanna spoke again. "You shouldn't have stopped." Klay glanced up at her. "Why is that?" "My people, they observe, always observe." Her small hands gripped the saddle horn. White men who assist, it confuses them. Something cold settled in Klay's gut. "Your people are watching us now?" Ayanna's dark eyes scanned the surrounding cliffs. They see everything in these mountains. Klay attempted to keep his voice casual. "And what do they typically do when they see white men?" "Depends." Ayanna shifted in the saddle. "Most white men take. You gave." The implication struck Klay like a physical impact. He'd entered territory where his kind were killed on sight, and now he traveled with living evidence that he'd been here. But retreat wasn't possible. Ayanna wouldn't survive another night alone. They walked silently for an hour, the sun beating down mercilessly. Klay's throat felt like sandpaper, but he pressed forward. Every step brought them closer to what? Safety seemed like fantasy now. "Klay," Ayanna's voice was barely audible. Yes, they're following us. Klay's blood turned to ice. He didn't turn around, didn't alter his pace, but every nerve in his body went on high alert. How many? I cannot tell, but... She paused. My grandfather taught me to count horses by the sound of their hooves. Many horses. Klay's mind raced. If they were being tracked by a war party, running was pointless. Dust was already lame, and carrying double would slow them to a crawl. Fighting was equally hopeless. His revolver held 6 shots, assuming he lived long enough to use them all. Ayanna, he said carefully, what did your grandfather tell you about white men? That most have hearts made of stone. She was quiet for a moment, but some have hearts that remember what it means to be human. And how can your people tell the difference? Before she could answer, the sound reached them, distant but unmistakable. Hoofbeats, many of them, moving fast and getting closer. Klay stopped walking. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, offering no cover, no escape. He helped Ayanna down from the horse and checked his weapon. 6 bullets against what sounded like an army. What happens now? He asked. Ayanna looked toward the sound of approaching horses, her expression unreadable. Now we find out if giving away your last bread was the smartest thing you ever did, or the last thing you'll ever do. The hoofbeats grew louder. Dust's ears twitched nervously, and Klay Hawthorne stood in the middle of nowhere, protecting a child with nothing but an empty stomach and a decision he couldn't take back. In the distance, dust clouds rose against the sky like smoke signals announcing his fate. The riders appeared over the ridge like shadows given form. 20 warriors on painted horses, moving with the fluid precision of men born in the saddle. Klay's hand hovered near his gun, but he didn't draw. Not yet. The lead rider was older, his face weathered by decades of sun and wind. Silver streaked his black hair, and his eyes held the weight of someone who'd seen too many battles. He raised his hand, and the entire party stopped 50 yards away. For a long moment, nobody moved. The silence stretched tight as a bowstring. Then Ayanna stepped forward. She spoke in her native tongue, her voice clear and strong despite her small size. Klay couldn't understand the words, but he caught the rhythm of explanation of storytelling. She gestured toward him, toward the empty cloth that had held the bread, toward herself. The old warrior listened without expression. When she finished, he studied Klay with eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. You are the one who gave away his last food, the warrior said in heavily accented English. Klay nodded. Yes. Why? It was a simple question that demanded a complex answer. Klay thought about lying, about claiming noble motives or strategic thinking. But something in the warrior's gaze demanded truth, because she was dying and I couldn't live with watching it happen. The warrior was quiet for a long time. Behind him, the other riders sat motionless, weapons ready but not aimed, waiting for their leader's word. I am Takakota, the old warrior finally said. Ayanna is my granddaughter. Klay's world shifted. The child he'd found wasn't just any lost soul. She was family to a war chief. The implications crashed over him like a flood. She was taken 3 days ago by rival clan. Takakota continued. We tracked the raiders to this place. Found only blood and torn clothing. We thought, his voice caught slightly. We thought she was dead. Ayanna moved to stand beside her grandfather's horse, and Klay saw the family resemblance in their identical dark eyes. But she lives, Takakota said, his gaze returning to Klay. Because you chose her life over your own comfort. Klay shifted uncomfortably. I just did what seemed right. Right. Takakota seemed to taste the word. Many white men speak of right. Few act on it when it costs them something. If you were Klay, what would you do? Accept whatever judgment was coming and hope for mercy, or try to negotiate safe passage for doing a good deed? Tell me in the comments. I need to know which side you choose. Because what Takakota said next would determine whether Klay lived to see another sunset. You have given me back my heart, the old chief said slowly. My granddaughter is the last of my bloodline. When we lost her, he shook his head. A grandfather's grief makes poor decisions. Klay waited, hardly breathing. But now she returns to us, fed by your sacrifice. Takakota's expression was unreadable. This creates debt. No debt necessary, Klay said quickly. I'm just glad she's safe. Takakota smiled for the first time, an expression that transformed his entire face. White man who refuses payment for saving a chief's granddaughter. You're either very wise or very foolish. Probably foolish, Klay admitted. Good. Wisdom can be taught. Character cannot. Takakota raised his hand again and Klay tensed, expecting the worst. But instead of weapons, the warriors behind Takakota began to dismount. You will come with us, Takakota said. Tonight you will be our guest. Tomorrow, he paused, and something mysterious flickered in his eyes. Tomorrow you will understand what your kindness has purchased. Tess, Takakota said simply. You eat different, let him prove it. Klay's pulse quickened. What kind of test? You will walk among us for one full day, Takakota explained. No weapons, no protection except our word. You will see how we live, share our food, hear our stories. And at sunset, he paused dramatically, you will choose. Choose what? Whether to return to your people with knowledge of our camps, our numbers, our weaknesses, or... Takakota's eyes gleamed, whether to carry a different message, one of possibility. The scarred chief leaned forward. And if he chooses wrongly, then nothing changes. The walls between us remain. Takakota met Klay's gaze. But if he chooses wisely, perhaps we begin building bridges instead of graves. Klay looked around the circle at hundreds of faces, some hopeful, some hostile, all waiting for his answer. He thought of Ayanna, now sitting safely with other children. He thought of his empty saddlebags, his uncertain future. I accept, he said. A new kind of murmur swept the crowd. Surprise, approval, concern, all mixed taut. If this man's heart is traitor. But as the chiefs nodded their agreement to the test, Klay caught sight of movement on the canyon rim above. Riders, white men, armed and watching. His blood turned cold as he realized the truth. Word of this gathering had spread beyond the tribes, and some people would kill to prevent what was happening here from succeeding. The test was about to become far more dangerous than anyone imagined. Klay spent the morning moving through the camp, like a ghost walking between worlds. Children who should have feared him brought him toys carved from wood. Elders shared stories of hunts and battles, their weathered hands painting pictures in the air. Women offered him food, prepared with care, usually reserved for family. But the riders on the ridge haunted his thoughts. Takakota, he said quietly when they were alone, we have a problem. The chief followed Klay's gaze to the canyon rim. His expression hardened. How many? At least a dozen. Armed, watching. Soldiers. Maybe. Could be civilians. Either way, they're not here for a friendly conversation. Takakota was quiet for a long moment. This is what we feared. Peace talks make some people nervous. What do we do? Nothing for now, but we prepare. Takakota gestured subtly, and Klay saw warriors beginning to drift toward the edges of camp. Not obvious, but ready. The day continued despite the threat above. Klay witnessed the daily life of people he'd been taught to consider enemies. He saw mothers teaching daughters to weave. He watched boys learning to shoot bows with the patience of their fathers. He shared meals with families who treated him like a welcome guest. As afternoon approached, the scarred chief, Red Bear, sought him out. You see how we live, Red Bear said. Not as savages, as people. I see that, Klay admitted. Yet your people come to our valley armed, watching, waiting. Red Bear's scarred face was grim. This does not surprise us. It disappoints, but does not surprise. Not all white men think the same way. No, then prove it. Red Bear pointed toward the canyon rim. Those men up there, they will not let this gathering end peacefully. They cannot afford to let word spread that natives and whites can coexist. Klay felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on him. What are you asking me to do? When the time comes, it will come soon, choose a side. Not between red and white, but between fear and hope. As if summoned by Red Bear's words, shouts erupted from the canyon rim. The riders were moving, no longer content to simply watch. Takakota appeared at Klay's side. It begins. How many are coming down? Too many. Takakota's jaw was set, but we are not defenseless. Warriors emerged from concealment throughout the camp. More than Klay had realized were present, but they were protecting families, children, elders. Fighting would mean casualties among innocents. There has to be another way, Klay said. What do you suggest? Klay looked at the approaching riders, then at the families around him. Ayanna sat with other children, her dark eyes wide with fear, but not panic. She trusted the adults to handle this. Let me talk to them, Klay said. Red Bear laughed bitterly. Talk? They come with guns, not words. Maybe, but I'm still white in their eyes. That might buy us something. Takakota studied him carefully, and if they do not listen, then we find out if your warriors are as good as their reputation. The sound of hoofbeats grew closer. In minutes, the riders would reach the valley floor, and any chance for a peaceful resolution would die in gunfire. This is madness, Red Bear muttered. Maybe, Klay agreed, but sometimes madness is the only sane response to an insane situation. He started walking toward the sound of approaching horses, leaving safety behind for the second time in 2 days. But this time, he wasn't just risking his own life. He was risking the lives of everyone in the valley. The riders thundered into the valley like a storm made of dust and fury. 15 men, heavily armed, faces set for violence. Their leader, a thick-set man with dead eyes, reined his horse hard when he saw Klay walking toward them. Well, the man called out, if it isn't the famous Indian lover himself. Klay stopped 20 feet away, hands visible and empty. Captain Morrison. So you do remember me? Morrison's smile was cold. Last time we met, you were leaving the army under unfortunate circumstances. Different war, different choices. Klay said evenly. Same yellow streak, looks like. Morrison gestured toward the camp behind Klay. Consorting with the enemy now? I don't see any enemies here. Just families. Morrison laughed harshly. Families that have been raiding settlements for months. Families that need to be taught a lesson. These people haven't raided anyone. This is a peaceful gathering. Peaceful? Morrison pointed to the warriors positioned around the camp. Looks like they're ready for war to me. Only because you brought one to their doorstep. The standoff stretched taut. Behind Morrison, his men fingered their weapons. Behind Klay, he could feel the camp holding its breath. Here's what's going to happen, Morrison said. You're going to walk away from this mess. Forget you were ever here. And maybe we'll let you ride out alive. And the people in the camp? That's not your concern anymore. Klay felt the moment crystallize around him. Everything he'd learned about these people in the past day. Ayanna's trust, Takakota's wisdom, Red Bear's challenge to choose between fear and hope. I can't do that. Morrison's face darkened. Then you're fool. Probably, but I've been called worse. Morrison raised his hand, and Klay tensed to the order that would turn the valley into a battlefield. But before Morrison could speak, another sound filled the air. Hoofbeats, many of them. Klay turned to see warriors emerging from hidden positions throughout the canyon, not just in the camp, but from the cliffs, the side canyons, the rocky outcroppings that dotted the landscape. Dozens of them, then hundreds. 500 warriors, just as Takakota had promised, all moving in complete silence, surrounding Morrison's small force like shadows given form. Morrison's men shifted nervously, suddenly aware they were vastly outnumbered. Impressive, Morrison said, but his voice had lost its confident edge. But we have better weapons. Do you? Takakota's voice carried across the valley as he rode forward. Look again. Morrison looked, and his face went pale. Every native warrior carried a rifle. New ones, well-maintained ones. Trade. Takakota explained simply. We are not as isolated as you believe. The math was simple and deadly. 15 men against 500. In terrain the natives knew intimately. Morrison's bravado crumbled like sand. What do you want? Morrison asked through gritted teeth. What we have always wanted, Takakota replied. To be left in peace. Red Bear rode up beside Takakota. This man, he gestured to Klay, has shown us that peace is possible. Today you will show us whether your people are capable of the same wisdom. Morrison looked at Klay with pure hatred. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Klay said quietly. It ends here today. You ride away, spread the word that these people want peace. Or you stay and explain to your superiors how you started a war you couldn't win. For a moment that felt like an eternity, Morrison weighed his options. Then slowly, he raised his hand in a different gesture. Retreat. Move out, he called his men. As the riders disappeared back up the canyon trail, the assembled warriors began to fade back in the landscape as silently as they'd appeared. Within minutes, the valley looked peaceful again. You chose well, Takakota said to Klay. So did you. This is just the beginning, Red Bear added. There will be others like Morrison. Maybe, Takakota replied. But there will also be others like Klay. And perhaps in time, there will be more bridge builders and wall builders. If you're enjoying the story, subscribe to the channel. As sunset painted the canyon walls gold and red, Klay realized his test was complete. He'd walked between worlds and found his place, not as white or native, but as something new, a bridge between peoples who'd forgotten they shared the same sky. Ayana ran up to him, her small face bright with joy. You stayed. I stayed, Klay confirmed. And in that simple exchange, the future began to change. Klay never returned to his old life. He became a translator, a mediator, helping other tribes and settlers find common ground instead of battlefields. Ayana grew up bilingual in both language and culture, eventually becoming a teacher who helped other children navigate between worlds. Takakota lived to see the peace he dreamed to take root, watching his granddaughter marry and raise children who knew no difference between red and white, only between right and wrong. And in the desert where a hungry cowboy once shared his last bread, a trading post grew into a town where all people were welcome. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness echoed across generations, reminding us that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "Here, take my last piece of bread." Now, click on the video on the screen to hear a story even better than this one, with a twist so powerful you won't forget it anytime soon. Click on the video.